My name is Heather Murray Elkins, and I invite you into a time of holy human stuff. This is a special week. This is, for me, the first week of the semester of spring 2019. But it is also the last first week that I will have teaching here in the forest. So I thought it was time to reflect on what teaching means and the ways in which we need to remember how we have been taught, those of us who are in that role of teaching, whether you have a formal title or in fact you have the task without the title. So I'm reflecting today on what does it mean to be a teacher, to have a teacher in this last first week in the forest. And I go back to when I came to study here, and it was in 1985. And I came to study with Bard Thompson, whose book, Liturgies of the Western Church, I had encountered the very first day in my class of worship at Duke. And I had paged through that first liturgy that had been named Apostolic Tradition. And when I read his editing, I decided if I ever went to a graduate school, I'd come and find the man who made this text available. And so that brought me to the forest and to study with Bard Thompson. And so I lodged here and began that work. And it was in my year of preparing to take comps, my third year here in the forest as a doctoral student, that we were preparing for the 10th anniversary of the founding of the Liturgical Studies program, one of the few in the United States. And we were going to have a celebration for the 10 years. And we were in the process of preparing that. And after that celebration, which would be in September, I would take my comps. And of course my major teacher and the field that I'd find myself in was the kind of work that Bard Thompson did. I was also helping pay for graduate school by being a chaplain in two different places. One was in the truck stop out on Route 80. And that's a whole other story, a truck stop chaplain. But the other chaplaincy I was engaged in part-time was here at Drew. I was the chaplain at Drew. And so there were many tasks that went into the preparing for that work. And one of the tasks was, at that time, because it suited the president, that the chaplain of the university had to say a prayer for the faculty whenever they met, once a month. But it wasn't the theological faculty. I guess the president assumed they knew how to pray for themselves. I had to say a prayer for the CLA faculty, the college faculty. And I apparently followed a chaplain whose tradition was to do long prayers. Well, I have to say at this point, even in the memory, that was not wanted, that work of prayer. There was great resistance. Why should they have to be prayed over by a Protestant chaplain? It was, I think, the president's curious sense of honoring Methodism, or maybe he just liked to make people uncomfortable. But I was informed in no uncertain terms those prayers were very unwelcome, very unwelcome. So I had to think what would be the appropriate prayer form if I had to do it to get paid and to minimize the stress on those who had to sit there. So my first prayer was very brief. I can remember as the September time came, the prayer was very simple. It was, Dear God, spare us from the accusation that those who can't do teach. Amen. Um, that helped, I think, a little. What I learned in the long run was those faculty, whether they espoused any religious faith at all, did believe that teaching was a wholly human activity. And so we came to some kind of truce about those prayers. But the second prayer was very different, because what happened as we prepared for the celebration, as I prepared to do my comps, as the world prepared to recognize the work of Bard Thompson, he died. He died very suddenly. He went to lunch and talked with a colleague about the mystical presence of Christ at the table in the work of Calvin, and he died on the way home. Well, that changed the world. And there are many things that could be said, but what I want to concentrate on now is a form of grief work and prayer that has to do with teaching and honoring teachers. Jasko Grosjean was at that time his assistant, his administrative assistant, and she then became the assistant academic dean in the graduate school. She had come as a student from Japan and had wonderful skills. But while she was here, she took lessons from a doctoral student, a Chinese artist, who was quite gifted, and she did calligraphy. And so I went to Jasko and I said, I need a visual prayer. I need you to do the word teacher. And then she said to me, well, which word in Japanese? Because that was her language other than English. And I said, well, is there more than one word? Oh, yes, she said. Well, what kind of teacher? Well, I said, show me. And so what she produced as part of her own grief work about her colleague and friend, and what then became a prayer that I copied and distributed for anyone who wished to come to my office and ask for them, a visual prayer. And it's the word teacher. And it's this word. And this word, probably best translated sensei, one that we are acquainted with. We've seen that. We understand that word. Those of us who speak English primarily. But so this is the one you follow after. And it's a gift, this word. If you have a sensei, if you have someone you can follow. But then she taught me another word, and I'll show it to you now. This is a more unknown word, but for English speakers. This is the word onshi. Onshi perhaps could be described as the one to whom you owe, the one to whom you are going to be indebted forever, or at least for your lifetime, because you can never pay back that teaching. You can only pass it on. So she said, you will have many senseis. What you hope for is that in your lifetime you have one onshi, one to whom you owe. And so I've just showed you the prayers that were offered to the faculty, and they all took them. And for years I would find them in their offices, because here in the forest and in many places beyond, those who teach understand teaching is a wholly human task. And for all those who have taught us, we are thankful.